The Rebel Alliance was one of the most successful resistance movements in the history of the galaxy that managed to topple the Galactic Empire, and we've seen how Rebel soldiers are incredibly effective in combat. But why is this, and how are they so effective? So, to understand this, we need to understand how difficult it actually is to train an army. And we see a lot of Rebel soldiers outskill Imperial Stormtroopers, and although in canon, Stormtroopers' training was relatively minimal, this does tell us that Rebel troops must have been trained pretty well. Actually, training troops takes time and resources, and we've seen that the Rebels didn't really have a lot of this. They were constantly being hunted by Imperials and fighting to stay alive, so their ability to train fresh recruits was limited. This tells us that they must have had some sort of framework in place to allow troops to become effective in combat, however. Now, there are some simple reasons why certain Rebel troops were so proficient in fighting. Some came from warrior backgrounds such as Mandalorians or Wookiees or various other races and species. Hell, some will have even been old enough to have been involved in the military before the Empire was around, such as Rex or Admiral Akbar. And as we know, majority of competent warriors who were around during the galaxy before the Empire will have likely been involved in the Clone Wars in some capacity. And this is essential in knowing how the Rebels were trained to fight. As well as this, we do need to remember that some Rebel soldiers may have actually got their training from the Imperials before deserting. Now, the Clone Wars was the first major-scale galactic conflict that occurred in over a millennia, and for this reason it shaped how warfare was conducted, and the clones and the CIS militaries essentially laid out the foundations for stratagems to come over the next few decades. As we know, the Empire mirrored that of the CIS's strategy, which focused more on the idea of overwhelming numbers. However, when we look at the Rebels and how they fight, it far more closely mirrors that of clone troopers of the Republic. Squads using cover, stealth, hit-and-run tactics. And this suggests that they must have somehow duplicated how the clones were fighting during the Clone Wars, but where did they learn to fight like this? Now, as I said, many veterans from the Clone Wars, from the Republic side, will have joined the Rebellion. And with this, they'll have brought their own knowledge. They likely had Republic-era military records from the war, which went over tactics that were used in certain scenarios. And they will have then used this military codex to train their own troops, as opposed to coming up with their own strategies themselves. As well as this, we need to consider the fact that the Rebels, how they survived, they often took over ex-Republic compounds as their own, and used Republic-era equipment such as walkers and Y-Wings. For this reason, much of their equipment was perfectly attuned to using Republic strategies. For this reason, needless to say, they fought like clones did, because that's what the equipment they were using was designed for. We also need to consider the fact that, as I said earlier, the Empire's strategy was similar to that of the CIS, and the Republic's strategy was designed to be perfect against them. So again, it made absolute sense for the Rebels to mirror that of the clone troopers of old. Ultimately, I believe that it makes a lot of sense on how the Rebels managed to get the military training that they required, as the stratagem. It had already been developed, tested and perfected by the clone troopers during the war, and it was the perfect model for them to base their own military off of. The Rebels didn't have the resources, nor the time, nor really the assets to be able to design their own stratagem from scratch. And at the end of the day, the Clone Army was one of the best fighting forces that the galaxy had ever seen. So yeah, of course the Rebels wanted their army to somewhat be like the clones. It makes a lot of sense at the end of the day, and they could get the data and the people they needed to train them to fight like clones. But what do you guys think? Do you believe the Rebels took clone strategies as their own? And how do you think they learned to fight like the clones? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed. If so, please do remember to like, share and sub, as it's really appreciated and it helps the channel grow. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at TheLawGuy and tick the bell for regular updates. But most importantly, thank you for watching. I hope you're all staying safe with current events, and I'll see you next time.